Hey guys, it's Abby from Autumn of Pelennor, and today I'm going to be going through my 2019 reading statistics. So I use Portland the Pages spreadsheets every single year from 2018 to track all of my reading and do all of my reading stats. I will be putting up the tables possibly and the graphs that are made from her stats thing because they're awesome, and I'm also going to link her channel down below and the video for her 2020 stats sheet. You can download it from there, you can watch the video, see if you're interested. I love it. And she also does a stats review herself, so definitely go check that out. So, I've written down on some very messy notes the important points to mention. Let me shuffle so I can put the stats here. So, first off, last year, 2019, I read 54 books. Not lots, kind of disappointing. I read 132 in 2018, but I was a lot busier, I was struggling a lot more to read. I'm still content with 54. In total, I read 15,454 pages across the entire year, which averaged out at a 4-star rating for all of my books, which is insanely high. An insanely high average for my star rating to be 4. So I picked some good books this year. We'll break that down a bit more later. So in terms of how many books I read, I averaged 4 books every month. Here is the graph showing you how many books each month. And in my best reading months, I didn't have any that were outstanding with the rest, but for January, February and July I read 9 books in each of those months, and then in May, August and September I read 0 books in all of those months. In May I was in Italy for the vast majority of the month doing fieldwork, and then August and September I was busy writing up my paper. So that's why that's 0. I don't know why January was 9, because that's when I had my heart up. I would have assumed it was going to be like 5 max. But it was 9. Not complaining. In terms of pages, I got an average of 1,288 pages each month. April was my highest reading pages month. It's too early in the morning. With 3,059 pages. And then the ones with the lowest amount of pages were obviously the 3 months that I didn't read for, because they had 0. And on average, it took 7 days for me to finish a book. So on average, I was reading a book a week, which isn't so bad. Then to break down the actual books themselves, this is the breakdown of the genres. My highest read genre is fantasy with 10 books, and my lowest read genre was graphic novels with 1 book. Graphic novel isn't really a genre, but then at the same time I do want to count them separately, so it's staying like that. Then you get to see how many pages you read, as in like which books you read in the different 100-page ranges. I read 18. I read 18 books in the 200 to 299 page range. I did read some bigger, I did read some smaller, but that seemed to be where I was hitting. I think I was just trying to get through books this year, so I don't know. We'll see how it progresses next year, but that's quite a small number of pages, and considering I have a lot of large TBR books, a bit concerning. As I mentioned before, for the star rating, 4-star is my average, and I read 25 4-star books. Here is the breakdown of all of them. 4-star was the most obviously prominent one by a little bit of a way, but I still did read some quite good books, and I didn't rate anything that low, which is really nice to see. In terms of the format that I was reading in, my vast preference always has been and always will be paperbacks. I read 41 paperbacks out of the 54 books I read this year. It's always going to be the type of book that I read the most, because unless I find them cheap, I don't want to waste the money on hardbacks. I tend to buy my books from charity shops anyway. A lot of the books in charity shops are paperbacks. If I get them from family and friends, they'll be paperbacks most of the time. I do have some new releases in hardbacks, but paperback is the majority. of what I own. In terms of when the books were published that I was reading in 2019, the vast majority of them, 16, were published between 2016 and 2018. I did actually read a few before the 1920s, which I hadn't been expecting. It wasn't planned, and I read mostly evenly throughout the different eras. I didn't expect to eras. I didn't expect to read as much as I did from all the different decades. But I also thought I might have read a couple more 2019s, but then I was reading some backlog, so that'll explain that, because I only read 4 books from 2019 in 2019. I had intended on taking part in Alex Black Reads and Abby Mac Reads rereadathon. I didn't. I reread one book. It was an accident. Didn't mean to reread it. It had a different title, but it was the same book. So out of the 53 were new books. I didn't reread. I'm aiming on actually participating in the reread this year, so we'll see how that goes. And then in terms of kind of what's going on within the books, something I'm disappointed in is that out of the 54 books, 49 of them had straight characters. So there wasn't a lot of diversity in the books, at least when it comes to sexuality. I don't think that's going to be changing much in 2020 just because of my goals for the year, but I'm really interested to see if it does. I really hope it does. We'll see. Definitely check out my goals video. It's going to be coming out in a few days. I think 2 days it'll be coming out. But so I did not read enough sexuality diverse books. Hopefully in 2021 I can make that a proper aim, but for 2020 my goal is annoyingly limiting, I've discovered. Oh well. Then for the breakdowns of the authors of my books. So I previously have always read a lot more women than men. This year I read more men than women. 50% of the books that I read were written by men. The reason that's more than women is that there were 2 books with mixed genders. So I read Illuminae, which has got Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, so man and woman, and then I read 11 Stories, 11 Doctors, or 11 Doctors, 11 Stories, which is written by, like, it's an anthology and it's mixed gender. So those 2 books mean that the women are not 50-50. I normally read a lot more women than men, so that was really interesting to see. It surprised me. In terms of where the authors came from, I was also kind of surprised. It was 65% Europe. I had expected myself to be picking up more American books just because they're prevalent, they're talked about a lot on BookTube and you want to pick them up and join in the discussion. But I didn't. I picked up 65% of my books from the Europe region and 50% of my books in total were from the United Kingdom, which I found really, really interesting and I'm actually pretty glad about because obviously I live here. My diversity wasn't too bad across the board. Here is all of the different countries that I read from. I did read from a decent number of countries considering that I wasn't attempting to do that, so I'm quite pleased with that. In terms of whether the authors were new to me or not, it was a pretty even split with 56% of them being new authors that I hadn't read before. I'm not too bothered about this either way. I'm not fussed whether I read authors I already know or new authors, but that's just something that Sophie tracks, so it's on the spreadsheet. Then we have one very bad stat and one very good and very surprising stat. The very bad stat. 89% of my reading was from white authors. That's really high. Really high. It's ridiculous. And because, again, of my goals for 2020, it's not going to change next year. At least as far as I can tell. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe when I actually check back next year, I will have. But it's ridiculous. I need to add more books to my TBR from people of colour, from all different races, black, Asian, native, everything. I'm sure I've missed some, I'm sorry. 89% white is a high number of white people. The ball's too white. No. So, and then moving on to better things, this was insanely surprising. So Sophie lets you track whether a book is translated or not from another language into English, or if you're not English, then from English into your language, I guess. Or any other language into your language. Don't know why I'm over-explaining that. And 56% of the books that I read in 2019 were translated. Like, what? I wasn't even trying. I wasn't even attempting to read translated books. It wasn't anything that was on my radar. I didn't think I'd read many translated books. If you'd asked me out of the 54, I would have said, oh, maybe 4. But 56% of the books that I read were translated into English. And I'm really happy with that. I feel like this increase in numbers of translated works slightly lessens the blow of the 89% white authors. Obviously, nowhere near enough. It doesn't lessen the blow anywhere near enough. That is too high of a number. But it does mean that I'm not just reading white Americans, Canadians, Brits, Irish people. Brain fog. Australia, New Zealand, all that. I'm reading people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. And I'll take that. It does make it a little bit better. Next is the age range of the books that I read. And again, similar to translated, the actual result was not what I expected. If you ask me, I would always assume I read a lot of YA. It seems to be quite predominant in what I'm posting about, in what I end up actively picking up because I know that I should read it. But I read mainly adult books in 2019. Here is the breakdown between adult, YA and NA, because I do not know how to break down the difference between young adult and new adult, because it all gets mixed in together, and then children's. And as you can see, I didn't read many children's books. I knew that. I don't read a lot of, for me children is middle grade and under, so like anything younger than YA. And I don't read a lot of it. I do read a few. There are a few series that I am still working my way through whenever I manage to find them. But I know I never read a lot. But I assumed YA was going to be a lot bigger than it is. There's a lot of adult on that pie chart. And I'm quite pleased with it. There is always that stigma of, oh, you're reading YA when you're not a YA. I mean, I kind of am, but not for the actual demographic that it's saying. Like, I am a young adult, but I'm 23. YA is meant to be for, you know, like 18 down to 12, I guess, for really young YA. And I'm not in that age range anymore. So I had been kind of concerned, which I shouldn't be, and I'm still going to read the YA books that I want to read. But it's interesting to see that my tastes are changing as I get older, and that I am actively reaching for older books subconsciously. Like, it's not been a conscious decision that, oh, I don't want to read that anymore, because I said to myself, you're being stupid, just read what you want. And it turns out that what I want is adult books. So I'm quite happy with that. I just thought that was a nice little thing to put in there. Then onto the books I bought. So if you know my 2019 goals, I'm going to be doing a wrap-up of them in a few days. Or it's already out. I don't know, my filming schedule confuses me. But a little spoiler is that I wanted to buy 50 books or less in 2019, and I succeeded. I bought 43 books. The vast majority of them were from the charity shop. So this is a section of the spreadsheet where you can track gifted and bought books. I removed the gifted ones just because I wanted to see what I had got, and I'm worse at tracking the gifted ones. Because like with the bought ones, I'll put it down on monthly expenses and I can go back. Gifted ones just kind of appear. So yeah, these were the books that I actively went out and purchased. There were 43 of them. I'm very pleased that I did not go over the 50. In terms of the genres that I was buying, my most bought genre was fantasy by a mile. I bought 17 fantasy books out of the 43, which I wasn't expecting. A lot of this has been like really interesting to see. I didn't know that I actively went up went and picked up fantasy books. I wouldn't have guessed, again, fantasy. That wouldn't have been what I assumed. I would have assumed mystery, because I bought a lot of Agatha Christie. So like crime, mystery, thriller, I bracket them all together, so I would have assumed that. No, fantasy. Which is good to know, because I loved fantasy as a child, and I had been wanting to make myself get more into it, but it seems like I'm fine. I'm already reading quite a bit of it. For the numbers breakdown, the month that I bought the most in was July. I bought 19 books in July. The vast majority, if not all of them, from charity shops. I remember the day that I bought, I think 17 of the 19 books. I went to the charity shop. It had been a month since I'd been there, so all the books that I would have picked up were still there, and they had a load of Agatha Christie for £1 each. And it was cheaper to buy the 8 or 9 Agatha Christies for £1 than it would have been to go buy one brand new in Waterstones. So I picked them all up, and then thought, hey, I might as well just carry on if I'm going to be buying like this anyway. And then I bought 19 books that day and had to carry them home as I walked home. It was worth it. 100% worth it. I have actually read a decent number of the 19, not all of them, I'm getting to them, but I read a decent number of them, so not bad. And then again, going back to the age range of the books that I purchased the most of were adult, with 60% of my books being adult books. Again, hadn't expected it. Again, nice to know. And then lastly is the spending. How much I spent. At least this is the last thing I actually wrote down. There are things about like books I borrowed. But I borrowed 3 books from my flatmate in January and then didn't borrow anything ever again for the entire year. So I'm just ignoring that part. So for the spending, how much the money I spent. Some people don't like to discuss this. I am going to do it anyway. So October is the month that I spent the most in, just narrowly beating, was it July? There was another month in the middle. I would assume it's July, seeing as I bought so many books. The reason October won is because I bought a brand new release from Waterstones, hardback, so that was £16.50 already, and then if I got anything else on top of that one book, it was immediately gonna bump it right up there. So that's why October is my biggest spend month. In terms of how much I spent per book, if you average it out, £2.28, which isn't bad. Considering that I did buy a few new releases this year, and then I just bought loads of books from charity shop ranging from £1 to £3. £2.28 is a decent price for each of the 43 books, and that ended up totalling out at, and my total overall spend for the year was £97.91, which is good and bad. For 43 books, that's a good price. That, like, for 43 books that I want to read, that's a really good price. But I don't have £100 to spend on books. What am I doing? Why am I wasting £100 on books? It's because it's all broken up into little bits. You don't think of it. I would never have got those 43 books and seen them in a stack and went, yeah, I'll give you £100 for that. Give me £2 something in change. Never in a million years. Hopefully 2020 won't be so bad. It should be better in 2020 because I am living at home for the foreseeable future, and by at home I mean at my parents' house, whereas I was living in uni halls. Living at my parents' house means that I have to smuggle the books in because they can see all of the books that I own and have not read. And they ain't pleased. Don't blame them. There's a lot. It is their house and I have a very small room. But so yeah, they will like tell me off, which is a good thing if I bring in more books. So it does stop me from buying too many books when I'm here. So that should be a lot better next year and I shouldn't waste my money. Fingers crossed. And those are my 2019 stats. That is everything that I read this year, broken down into numbers and information. Now of course there are probably more statistics I could have went into that I could have decided to track on the spreadsheet, but I was quite happy to remove a couple of things that Sophie had put on and just track the basics from the spreadsheet. I find it really, really interesting and I love getting the information back at the end of the year. Sophie said in her stats video recently that she prefers the numbers rather than the graphs, and I do too. I definitely prefer seeing the actual numbers in the tables than the graphs, but the graphs make for really good video usage, so that's why I put them in. But yeah, so I'm really glad I used it. I'm definitely still using it next year in 2020. I've already been filling it in. As of currently, don't text me. As of right now, I've read 2 books and I'm finishing up my 3rd. It'll probably be similar by the time I post this. And so I've already filled it in so far for those 2 books. I'm waiting to fill it in for the 3rd one. It's just a really handy thing to use. So as I said at the beginning of the video, I've linked Sophie's video. Portal in the Pages is her channel name. I've linked the video down below. Definitely go check out the 2020 video. You can see the spreadsheet, see if you want to use it, and download it. It's absolutely free to download. Sophie has opened up, I think it's a Patreon, and you can do like a singular month donation, because quite a few people were saying that they wanted to give her some sort of payback for all the work that she puts into the spreadsheet. So you can pay if you want, but it is a completely free download. And now that I've stopped plugging Sophie, definitely like the video if you liked it. I love stats. Tell me your stats. Just pick one insane stat and leave it down in the comments for me below if you know it. Whether that's the amount of books you read, whether that's how many books are left on your physical TBR. For me, it would be the fact that I read 56% of my books from translated languages. That's still blowing my mind. Literally, I saw that on the spreadsheet last night when I was prepping it, and my mouth just went, what? It was mad. I was so shocked and so happy. Good shocked. Leave me your stat down below, your most impressive, your weirdest, your most shameful stat. Tell me, and tell me if you want to make any changes to how your stats look in 2020. If you do want to see some more from me, hit the subscribe button. I do have quite a few videos coming out this week, but it will be on a more normal schedule after this week. I just need to get all of my end of year videos done because I was working retail in December and could not do that. So they're getting done now. But it will be back to a more normal schedule of a couple of videos every week, roughly. So yeah, definitely make sure to subscribe. Click my links down in the description if you want to see some more of me elsewhere on the internet. I post a lot on Instagram. I do tweet, but it's mainly Instagram. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Who's texting me? Oh, it's the hospital. Great.